Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to conclude our Hanson Underneath review series with our look at the documentary on the making of Underneath, Strong Enough to Break. Now, as I said, this was a documentary on the making of Underneath. Um, Hanson started recording started to uh, record their third album after in 2001. Um, they were signed at the time they started recording. They were signed to Island Def Jam, which um, which is now a defunct rap label, and they were um, they were uh, the record company was not being very. They were losing support from their record company because the record company still saw them as the teeny bopper, boy band that they started out to be, and uh, like like any other band, Hanson was trying to um, evolve, you know, uh, evolve from that. And so, needless to say, they weren't, the record company wasn't being very supportive uh, toward toward the band, and so Hanson decided to make a documentary about the process of recording Underneath, and they called it Strong Enough to Break. Um, and in the beginning of the documentary, they were talking about how the record company wasn't being very supportive, and they were um, the record company was trying to was uh, they would Hanson um, thought um, Hanson thought they had been recording demos for at least 2 years for the third record, and they kept turning them into the record company, and Island Def Jam would always say write more, and they would um, Hanson was working with some of the greatest songwriters um, in music history, like Carole King and Danny Korchmar, or songwriters and record makers in the industry, and people like uh, Carole King and Danny Korchmar, and so they decided to make a documentary about the process of making Underneath, and they so that's what this is, and I find it kind of and I find it really kind of fascinating to actually see them rec- recording, recording these songs, and also finding it frustrating. And I find it frustrating as a fan that they weren't being, they were basically being jerked around by the record company because the record company wouldn't let them evolve. And as I said yesterday, with every successive Hanson release, their sound gets harder, and their sound changes a little bit. I mean, they still kind of retain retain their old sound, but it evolves, and music should do that. And the record company wasn't allowing them to do that, so they felt stagnant. And so the only thing that they knew to do was keep recording, and so they did, and so um, Strong Enough to Break is also kind of a journey to the story of how they um, decided to go independent and start their own record label, which is 3CG Records. And like I said yesterday, they had they had the #1 independent record of 2003 when Underneath came out. And but there are so many songs that were recorded for Underneath that didn't make it on the record. But along with the documentary, there is a bonus CD, which is basically the soundtrack CD of all the songs that didn't make it on Underneath. And some of my favorites on there are, and they also have the early versions of some of the songs that did make it on Underneath. But some of the songs that that didn't make it on that are my favorites include "Wake Up," "Dream Girl," and there's an acoustic version of "Love Somebody to Know" that I mentioned when we were doing the song review for "Love Somebody to Know." And so, like I said, this documentary is basically the story of how they became the journey on to becoming independent of a record company. And so anyway, and the there are several special features on the documentary, including a commentary track where Hanson talks about the making of the documentary with the director, Ashley Grayson, and another special feature is that Hanson themselves, there's an interview with them talking about all the songs on the soundtrack CD and kind of giving the background of when they were written. And a lot of the songs and they also mention, I think in the commentary, that one of my favorite songs, "One More," which was from their Walk album, was written around, I think this time around. A lot of the songs, "One More," from the, some of the songs had been around for years until they made it to record. And one of the ones that didn't, that would eventually see the light of day on the Walk, was "One More," and which I will be talking about when we do our presentation on the Walk, or our review of the Walk a little farther down the road. But Uh, so overall, I give Strong Enough to Break about 5 stars, and I hope you enjoy it.